All right, back to where it all started, Jordan Peterson's early days in academia. Now, he wasn't just some average student wandering through university corridors. He kicked off at the University of Alberta, tackling not one, but two bachelor's degrees in psychology and political science. Right from the start, you could see him laying the groundwork for this fascinating mix of science and culture he'd later become known for.
And it wasn't merely about collecting credentials either. That dual focus, psychology and political science, offered him two lenses to view the world, one digging into the intricacies of the human mind, the other analysing the frameworks that govern society. It's a combination, let's be honest, we don't see very often, but one that shaped the thematic depth of his work.
Yep, and from Alberta, he zoomed off to McGill University for his PhD. His thesis? A deep dive into potential psychological markers for the predisposition to alcoholism. It was here, investigating addiction and behaviour, that Peterson began interweaving psychology with major real-world issues. Imagine studying the minds of people battling one of the toughest dependencies. He wasn't just crunching numbers, he was getting into the gritty depths of human behaviour.
Exactly, and that marriage of scientific rigour and raw humanity continued to serve him well. After McGill, Peterson stayed on for postdoctoral research at Douglas Hospital, where he delved into familial alcoholism. There was this undercurrent, wasn't there? A belief that understanding individual struggles could provide clarity on collective issues and vice versa.
And if all that wasn't enough, fast forward to 1999, when he releases Maps of Meaning, the Architecture of Belief. Bit of a mouthful as titles go, but it's anything but dull. This book really stitched together his passions, psychology, philosophy, mythology. It connected dots between belief systems, how people make sense of chaos, and, crafted narratives we live by, like a psychological toolbox of humanity.
It's one of those works that doesn't fit neatly into a single category, right? It pulls from mythology, literature, religion, neuroscience, all in an attempt to answer fundamental questions about meaning and belief. For anyone who's ever wondered why we align ourselves with certain ideologies or how we process the world, Maps of Meaning is groundbreaking.
Completely. And it wasn't just some academic piece collecting dust in libraries. No, his ideas started resonating with young scholars, people looking to bridge hard science with cultural understanding. It's no surprise that this work laid the foundation for his later fame, or, let's say, notoriety, in more heated cultural debates.
True, even before the debates and controversies, there was already a spark of someone who could articulate big ideas in ways that engaged both heart and mind. It's fascinating to see how those early academic roots set the stage for everything that followed, don't you think?
Absolutely. And speaking of what followed, well, let's just say things got a lot louder when he spoke out against Bill C-16 in 2016. That's where we're headed next.
Building on that spark we talked about, let's fast forward to 2016, when Jordan Peterson left the lecture halls and landed in the middle of the public spotlight. It all began with a series of YouTube videos where he vehemently opposed Bill C-16, a Canadian law that added gender identity and expression to anti-discrimination protections. Now, on the surface, that might sound like just another policy update, right? But to Peterson, it represented something much bigger, an attack on free speech, forcing people to adopt certain gender pronouns. And as you might imagine, that viewpoint lit a firestorm like no other.
Absolutely, it wasn't just a legal debate. Peterson framed it as a deeper issue of individual liberty. He believed that mandating language infringes on freedom of expression, a core tenet of a free society. Critics, however, said he was misinterpreting the law, insisting it wasn't about forcing speech, but about protecting individuals. Yet, this was Peterson at his most polarizing, wasn't it? He became, almost overnight, a symbol of resistance against what he saw as political correctness gone too far.
And that's where the global conversation began. You had supporters who felt he was defending some universal right. But then there were just as many detractors slamming him for encouraging backlash against transgender rights. It was this divide that pushed Peterson into the mainstream. Whether people loved or loathed him, they were talking about him.
And that wasn't the only thing fueling the spotlight, was it? Enter 12 Rules for Life. Published in 2018, this book blended psychology, philosophy, and self-help, offering practical principles like stand up straight with your shoulders back to navigate chaos. But it sparked just as much debate as it inspired. Many saw it as empowering, almost revolutionary, but others dismissed it as paternalistic or overly simplistic. It's fascinating how one book could stir up such intensity.
Totally. The thing is, the book wasn't just a self-help guide. It tapped into this much bigger cultural moment, especially for young men who felt like they were being sidelined in social narratives. It felt like Peterson was giving them permission to take charge, to embrace responsibility. But, like you said, not everyone saw it that way. Critics called his advice outdated, even regressive.
Indeed. And the conversations weren't confined to the printed page, thanks to his massive success on YouTube. His channel became this platform where he could expand on the rules, delve into topics like meaning, faith, and social structures. But, and this is key, it also became a battleground. Supporters praised his intellectualism. Detractors argued he was polarizing audiences even further with controversial rhetoric.
It's almost like he mastered the art of sparking debates, whether it was his lectures, interviews, or his sometimes fiery rebuttals. Digital media amplified everything he said. And let's face it, in a world where attention is currency, that amplification turned him into a cultural phenomenon.
Right. The reach of his ideas, whether you agreed with them or not, was unprecedented. Digital platforms transformed him from an academic to a global influencer, polarizing but undeniably impactful. This rise highlighted the power and the peril of conversations in the digital age, and it laid the groundwork for the next chapters of his life, which took an unexpectedly personal turn.
With such an intense spotlight on him, it's no surprise that the pressures of public life began to take their toll. Let's shift gears now to explore some of the more personal and professional struggles Peterson has faced in recent years. For starters, there's his battle with benzodiazepine dependence, a journey that put him through some truly harrowing health challenges. It's a situation that exposed not just the strain of public life, but also broader issues surrounding how we approach mental health and addiction in society.
Absolutely, it's intriguing, isn't it? Here's a man who spent his career exploring human behaviour, and suddenly he's thrust into the very kind of struggle he spent years analysing. His decision to seek unconventional treatment abroad and the complications that followed. It was all very public and, frankly, deeply polarising. But it also sparked important conversations about mental health in high-pressure environments like academia. When we put our intellectuals on pedestals, do we forget they're human too?
Yeah, and for someone like Peterson, who's often been labelled a symbol of resilience and order, it added this layer of vulnerability to his story. But then, in classic Peterson fashion, he bounces back and releases Beyond Order, 12 More Rules for Life. Love him or hate him, you've got to admit, it takes guts to turn personal chaos into something creative. The book wasn't just a sequel, it felt like a statement, you know?
It did. And it coincided with another milestone, his appointment as Chancellor of Ralston College. Now, it's a small, avant-garde institution, but the role symbolised his enduring influence in education, even after stepping away from the University of Toronto. It proved that Peterson's ideas, whether academic or controversial, continue to resonate in certain intellectual circles, particularly among those hungry for alternative perspectives on learning.
But then there's the flip side of that influence, the scrutiny. Take the recent court ruling against him, for example. It upheld disciplinary actions by the College of Psychologists of Ontario over his public statements. And while supporters saw it as a battle of freedom of speech versus cancel culture, critics argued it was about accountability in professional ethics. It's this tightrope, isn't it? Between expressing ideas and respecting the boundaries of your field.
Exactly, and that's what makes Peterson such a lightning rod. This isn't just about one person, it's about larger societal tensions. Can you hold on to your principles without crossing lines? Can you challenge taboos while upholding professional standards? He's not the first thinker to walk that line, and he certainly won't be the last. But his journey pushes these questions front and centre in today's world.
And maybe that's the point, right? Whether you see Peterson as a hero, a provocateur, or something in between, he represents the messy complexity of having ideas in a world quick to polarise. His triumphs and struggles aren't just his, they mirror debates we're all grappling with. Freedom, ethics, responsibility.
So true. And as we reflect on his journey, it becomes clear that his impact isn't just in the answers he offers, it's in the questions he provokes. Love him or loathe him, the conversations he sparks are unlikely to fade anytime soon. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up.
Absolutely. And that's all for today, folks. Thanks for joining us as we dove into the world of Jordan Peterson, a journey filled with ideas, debates, and yes, contradictions. Until next time, take care and keep asking the big questions.